Okay, hey folks, Mark Locklear here with a screencast on chapter 4. And let's see, chapter 4 is how to retrieve data from two or more tables. So let me share my desktop here. Desktop 1. All right, here we go. So we're going to be working in a couple different windows here. Okay, for starters, yeah, hopefully you've read the chapter at this point. I'm just going to hit a couple of high points in the book, and then we're going to jump right into writing some code. I'm going to work through one of the My Guitar Shop exercises and just sort of get you started on that, and just give you a sense again. What I try and do in these screencasts with the coding I do is just let you see sort of what my process is. Different for everybody. The way I do it is there might be a better way for you, but I think it's probably a pretty good starting point. And yeah, it'll just give you an idea of sort of what my development process looks like, in an environment like this. I mean, the other thing that's probably good to note too is that, depending on the language you're coding in, depending on, in a database environment like this, where we've got a Linux server, I'm going to be using a text editor to do some editing locally and then paste those in. There's all kinds of different ways to do it. Again, in the book, the MySQL workbench is a big part of what they use, and that sort of gets around the GUI part. That gives you an actual GUI interface to work from. But since we don't have that in this environment, we've just got a plain Linux server, which is by design, by the way. I mean, we could set this up so you've got a GUI, but I think it's worth forcing you to learn some of those Linux skills and get comfortable in in a console sort of terminal environment, because there, again, if you go on to do great things in software development, you're going to likely need to do that kind of stuff. Okay, so this is how to retrieve data in two or more tables. So basically we're talking about joins, right? That's the long and short of it. The bulk of this section is spent on inner joins. Those are generally the most popular ones and the most common ones. And so I've got a couple things highlighted I'm going to hit. First one is, this really sort of sums it up. If you can wrap your brain around, like if you had to choose one paragraph for the entire chapter to sort of sum things up, this would be it. So what is an inner join? So to join data from two tables, you code the names of the two tables in the from clause, along with the join keyword and an on phrase that specifies the join condition. Join condition indicates how the two tables should be compared. That's really the sort of, that really encapsulates everything we're trying to do here. And so an example of that looks just like this, super simple, right? I mean, maybe not super simple to the uninitiated, but once you understand it, it's not a big deal, right? So this case, we're selecting, so we're going to do a select statement first. We're going to select invoice number and vendor name. And then where are we selecting that from? We're selecting from vendors, so the vendors table, and then we're also going to join that to the invoices table. So we're talking about two different tables here. And then how are we going to join that, or what are we going to join it on, right? There has to be a common field or a common column that we're going to join these tables on. And again, if you see this in your mind's eye, the idea is, think about, in this case, the vendors table and the invoices table. We're going to be joining it on vendor ID. So both of those tables have this vendor ID column. And again, imagine these two tables in space, and then you sort of lay them on top of one another, probably looking like this, whereas my fingers are going to be the rows. One of these fingers, let's say, is, and I'm going to say my middle finger here, maybe my point finger here, is going to be vendor ID. When you join them, you sort of lay them on top of one another, and you join them or lay them on top of one another on that common field. Again, in this case, the vendor ID field. And then, of course, the last statement here is an order by clause. Pretty straightforward. That's just how we're going to, ascending or descending, how are we going to list them out when we display the results. In this case, it's going to be ordered by the invoice number. Okay, so that's sort of the big concept here. If you can really wrap your brain around that, you've really got it as far as this chapter goes. I've got a note here. I just thought I would mention about natural joins. You can do natural joins. They don't explicitly specify join columns. So there's some, I think I've mentioned about something being ambiguous or not. The problem with natural joins is they're ambiguous, right? They're not explicit. And if we look at an example of a natural join here, again, very similar to what we looked at before, where this is the vendors and the invoices table. And because both of these tables have I think vendor ID was what it is, they're automatically joined on that, although we're not explicitly saying it here. So again, the issue is there's a couple of problems with it. Number one, it can cause errors because MySQL is making some assumptions because it is sort of an ambiguous query. So assumptions are being made, and anytime assumptions are made, like bad things happen. Like that's true in life, like in your relationships and everything else, and in code too, right? If it's having to sort of guess and make assumptions, then it may work sometimes, but other times it may not work. So that's why it's sort of a bad thing. And so generally the point here is that you can see while you can do natural joins like this, they're generally not a good idea. If you're just doing an ad hoc report, your boss says, hey, I need a report. I need you to run. I need you to pull some data for me real quick and give me all the vendors who have X, Y, and Z. And you're confident that it's giving you the result you want, maybe it's okay to do there. But generally in a production environment, I think they make that point in the book that, like, if you're actually writing code that's you're going to save and is going to be run in some kind of production environment, generally not a good idea to do it. So try to avoid those. In fact, I wouldn't even, I was hesitant to even mention it because it's something you shouldn't be doing. And then the last one we have here is a union. And again, unions again use the union keyword. They connect two or more select statements, and for this to work, the result of each select statement must have the same number of columns and the data types of corresponding columns to each table. And they've got an example here. If we look at this example, so essentially what you got is, again, two separate select statements here. At this point, these should sort of make sense. Relatively simple select statement. You're selecting a handful of fields from, in this case, active invoices, and then you've got a where clause, and then you've got another very similar select statement, and you're basically going to be joining those. I mean, essentially all you're doing is adding these into a single. You're taking these two separate queries, and you're just sort of, and again, I'm using my hands to sort of mimic rows here. You're just putting them into a single result set. Okay. All righty. So let's look at some code. So in this case, I'm going to take this may be different depending on when you're watching this. I use these videos for different classes, but I'm going to choose exercise 1 from the My Guitar Shop exercises. So this is going to be number 1 here. And I'm not going to probably 100% do it for you, but I'm just going to get you started on it just to give you an idea of what the sort of development process looks like for this. Okay. All righty. So let's just start by reading through it. It says, write a select statement that joins the categories table to the products table and then returns these columns. In this case, the columns are going to be category name, product name, and price list. And let me, okay, I just wanted to make sure I had the right spot in the book where I wanted to look. So, so how do we get started here? So the first thing I would do is, they've asked us to do this, create this join statement. Well, let's go to the book, right? I mean, the book has pretty good amount of examples. So we can use an inner join to do this. I think the book talks about a join versus an inner join. Inner join is just an explicit way to say that it's an inner join rather than being an outer join. So this example is a pretty good place to start here, right? And I'm looking at this. This is the example we looked at earlier in the screencast, too. So let me also get logged into the server. So your server may be a little different, and your login information is going to be different, but just so you. So I'm logging into the server. Notice I'm hitting the up arrow here. Up arrow is a quick way to get back to a previous command. Also, I'm hitting Control R. Control R is called a reverse search. And what I can do is any command that I've previously run is in my history. So I can do Control R and then begin typing any portion of the command. So I'm just going to type MySQL, and lo and behold, look, the previous command I typed, MySQL login command comes up. Okay, so that's just another quick hack. So logging in with my password. Okay, there we go. And then let's do show tables, show databases, and we're going to be using the My Guitar Shop. Again, your database name may be a little different here, but it should be either Guitar Shop or My Guitar Shop. And I don't want to type all that in, so I'm just going to double click on this and highlight it. And I'm going to say use, and then I'll paste that in. Okay. And then show tables. Okay, that looks good. Okay, so let's go back to our requirements here. And it is, so again, I'm just processing this to sort of see how I want to start. So I know that I'm going to be joining the categories in the products table. So first thing I'm going to do is like, what do I know about the products and categories table? So I'm going to do you may not have covered this. I don't think we've covered this in the book yet, but there's a describe command. So I'm going to describe categories, and I am also going to describe DESC products. And the describe command just shows you the attributes of a table. So here, the categories table has category ID and category name. That's pretty simple, right? And then the products table has a product ID, category ID, so on, so on, so on. So the first thing I should notice is, what is the primary key here, okay? Look at these two tables. I'm just going to pause for about 10 seconds. Then ask yourself, what's the primary key? Okay, I didn't quite wait 10 seconds. Anyway, it's category ID, right? So if I go back to my requirements here, if I'm going to be joining these two tables, category ID is what I'm going to want to use, right? I mean, there's no other way. Again, when we think about we're going to join these two tables, we've got to have some common field to join the two tables on. So it's pretty obvious that category ID is the only one between these two tables we're going to be able to join them on. So that's what we're going to do. Going back in the book and looking at our sample here, so the first thing we're going to do is, and one way to do this might be, you know what, I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to leave the order by out. Let's see if I can copy this and then paste it. No. Yeah, you can't always. Yeah, here's copy. Here we go. Okay, so the other thing I'm doing here, notice I've got this text pad. So again, and I think I did this in previous screencasts. This text pad is local, so I'm going to sort of be doing my editing and typing inside the text pad, and then what I'll do is paste that inside. I'll paste that inside the terminal window, and I'll actually run the commands there. I'm going to leave the order by clause out. Let me go back here. Yeah, one of the last requirement here is to sort the result set by category name. I can leave that out for now. Again, you want to sort of, let's try to boil this query down to its most simplest parts before we, let's boil it down to the key pieces that we need, and then the order by can be the last thing that we'll add to it. So the first thing it says, write a select statement that's going to join the categories and products table. So here's our columns right here. And in fact, I can probably maybe paste these, copy and paste these in. These are the columns that I want. So I am going to paste these in here. And I'm going to sort of edit this. I'm going to return this down here so it makes a little more sense. And in fact, well, yeah, let me not do that. Okay. So we've got our select statement in place. And again, if we look at the example in the book, the select statement just says, okay, what columns do you want to return when you display it? So I've got those in place. And then so the next thing is our from statement, where what tables are we trying to join here? Well, in this case, remember it said the categories and the products table. So that's easy enough. Let's go here and change categories and then products. All right. So in this case, we're going to be selecting category name, product name, list price. And we're going to select that from categories, and then we're going to inner join. And you could do a join or an inner join here. Either one of these should work, and maybe we can experiment with that when we're done. And then what are we joining these two tables on? And so remember when we looked at the attributes of each of the tables, we decided, okay, the category ID is the common field, or the primary key field for each of these, and there's a relationship between those two. So we're going to do so yeah, this is our on statement. So we're going to do, what I'm going to do is highlight both of these. I'm going to paste that in, and then I need to change vendors and invoices, right? So instead, this should be categories and products. All right. Got our select statement, selecting our fields from categories and products. And then we are going to join these on categories.category ID and products.category ID. This should run in its current state, right? So I'm going to go over, I just copied that from my text editor. I'm going to paste it in here and hit return. Boom. So this looks pretty good. So we're really there, right? The last thing we got to do, I mean, that should do it for us. Last thing we need to do is add our order by statement. I'm going to leave you all to do that. But just because we got some results here doesn't necessarily mean it's right. So it's worth like sanity checking what we did, or at least from a logical standpoint, and say, you know, is there some way I can sort of test this to make sure it's giving me the result that I'm looking for? So I'm going to pause for 1 second. Okay, so just a real quick way to sanity check this. Again, the idea is that, okay, I've ran this query, but like, is there some way I can sort of test it outside of this to make sure it's returning the data that I want? And one way is to, let's choose one of these products that was returned, and let's look at the data in each of the databases. So for instance, I can look on the category side. In this case, if I select star from categories where category name is bases, so for instance, I'm looking for these two, and I hit return, notice that it gives me this category ID of 2 here. And then for instance, if I run a query, these are previous queries that I run, I'm just hitting the up arrow. If I look at select all products that have a category ID of 2, I can look at that, and then I see that there's actually 2 that are being returned here. This is not the easiest to sort of sort through, but I can see one of these is the same as that initial that initial row that was returned. Okay, so I think that's all for now. I'm going to stop there. Again, this idea of sort of, you know, the steps from a development standpoint here are, you know, sort of look at an exercise you get, sort of process it as best you can, find an example and then the book that's close to it. You know, maybe start with that. You can edit that. Again, I like using a text in an environment like this where I don't have a GUI to interface with. Usually a lot faster to sort of use a text editor to be able to create queries and then just paste those inside the terminal and look at the results. Okay. Okay, that's all for now. As always, if you have questions, just let me know.